Hi, welcome to Trauma Talks with Russ Tellup. I am Russ Tellup. I'm your host. I am a trauma-informed somatic coach with Mind, Body, Spirit, and Brain Spotting with CS, based in Colorado Springs. Today we are interviewing Brinn Langdale. Brinn is a therapist and coach that does work primarily in parts work. She's going to talk a little bit about IFS and what parts work is, what that looks like, and the types of healing that you might expect from parts work. We're going to talk a little bit about her history and some of the things that she's gone through that led her to this type of work, and then some of my history and what led me to this type of work as well. So enjoy, and we'll talk to you guys afterwards. Thank you. Hi there, my name is Russ. I'm a trauma-informed somatic life coach with Mind, Body, Spirit, LLC and Brain Spotting Colorado Springs. And I've got a guest with me today, Brinn Langdale. Brinn, could you give us just a quick rundown of kind of where you're coming from and where you're going?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Russ. So yes, I am a licensed therapist. And before that, I was a coach. And I specialize in parts work. So I help people identify and work with their inner child, their inner critic, and really strengthen that adult self, because we need that strong adult self to then soothe the inner child or befriend the inner critic. So that's kind of the lens in which I work. And the reason that I do this type of work is because this is the work that I started doing 15 years ago when I was 22. And that's when I did a deep dive into my own healing journey. Awesome. So yeah, it was basically I had a pretty I dealt with a lot of trauma growing up. It was almost like I had like two different lives almost. Like on one hand, I came from a very loving and supportive family. You know, we gave hugs and kisses and said, "I love you." And on the other hand, kind of like behind closed doors, it was very chaotic and traumatizing. There was a lot of physical, emotional, and even sexual abuse within the house. And so that was something I dealt with my entire childhood.
Okay.
And really just kind of suppressed it for a while.
Right. And then you started your journey around 22 years old. And how old are you now? How long has that been?
I am 37.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So when I was 18, everything kind of came to a head. It came out about the sexual abuse that was going on, had happened between me and a sibling, which is something that is extremely common, but is actually not really talked about and is pretty taboo to talk about. But and at the time, none of my family had ever heard of it. We tried to go, find resources. There weren't any available. Luckily now that's shifting a little bit. And that's one of the reasons I'm publishing a memoir, is so we can have a little bit more discussion around such a prevalent issue in our society. But yeah, so that all happened. And then, I was acting out in all sorts of ways. I was drinking, getting blackout drunk, smoking I've been smoking since I was 9 years old. Very, very much risk behavior. So hurting myself and eating disorders and struggled with a lot of stuff. And so by the time college hit and it all kind of came to a head, and I had a boyfriend at the time who I'd been together with for a while. And he basically sat me down and was like, "Hey, unless some things change, I can't do this anymore." Mm-hmm. And that's what really got me on my healing journey. So I'm really grateful that he, had the courage to tell me that. And then I'm also really grateful that I had the courage to listen, because I could have easily blown him off and said, "Well, screw you, I'll go find somebody else."
In fact, that probably would have been more in line with what you would normally do too, right?
Yeah. It was, but there was, I had a respect for him, and I knew what I was doing. I could kind of see, and it wasn't just him, it was affecting all of my relationships. So I had enough awareness to be like, all right, let's change some things. So I enrolled in an 8-day leadership program, and this leadership program completely changed my life. And, people say that, but like it literally changed my life, because it got me on like such a different trajectory. And it got me understanding about my inner child, these different parts of myself, how to soothe them. It got me also understanding what happens to the brain when, trauma happens, what happens to the body. It introduced coping skills, helped me identify my feelings and how to communicate. And it really shifted a lot. And then I kept with it. And that was the big key. Is it wasn't just this like, oh, I'm going to go to this retreat and it's like a one and done, or, oh, I feel good now. I kept at it for years and years and years and years. And it's actually a program that I'm a part of the leadership team on now. And
Oh, very
it's
cool.
something that, so I like to give back, and it's a totally voluntary position. Everybody involved is a volunteer.
And
So
what is the name of this program?
it's called the Authentic Leadership Center, and it is in Sacramento, California.
And is it something that people can do remotely if they were interested in trying it out?
Actually, you can attend like some of their weekly support groups, but the actual training itself is an in-person training.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's how I became a coach, is I started working with them and coaching with them and, studying under my mentor there, who's a psychologist. And that's where I really learned a lot about these different parts of ourselves.
Yeah. So bringing up parts work, that's what you specialize in, is IFS, internal family systems, and parts work, inner child healing, that type of thing. Can you just give us a high level run through of what that looks like and why you chose that path?
Yeah. So basically it's this idea that we all have these different parts of ourselves, right? There's a part of you that wants to eat that, third slice of chocolate cake, and the part of you that thinks like, hey, maybe that's not the best idea for me. The part of you that wants to go to the gym, and the part of you that's like, no, I'm going to sit here and watch TV, right? The part of you that wants to quit your job, the part of you that doesn't, right? We all have these different parts of ourselves. And parts work is basically an umbrella term for any sort of coaching or therapy where you get to know these parts as if they are their own personalities. So, for example, I talk about the inner critic a lot. So the inner critic is this part of me that is all of my, judgmental thoughts, my, the judgment, the harsh, the mean, the pushy, the part of me that's telling me I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I can't do anything right, I'm not creative, right? Anything like that. And so that's what I consider the inner critic. And it's sort of this like shaming, like wag your finger, like, hey, be better, you should do better. I'm gonna tough love you into being better. I'm gonna be that drill sergeant who's gonna break you down so you can build up. Because the bottom line is that part of ourselves is actually trying to protect us. And the metaphor I use for that is, imagine you're walking down the street with a little kid, and that little kid runs out into the middle of the street. You might react by saying, why are you running out in the middle of the street? Don't you ever run out of the street ever again? Oh my gosh. You're sounding pretty critical. You're sounding pretty mean. You're sounding pretty judgmental and harsh. But really, what's going on underneath that? Like, what's the emotion that's coming up underneath that? Is you're scared.
Sure.
You're scared that something bad is going to happen.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest parts of IFS that I've fallen in love with, is no matter what that part is doing, and no matter how that might be detrimental or not serve you now, its main focus is positive. Its main focus is to help you. Its main focus is to protect you. And it's doing the best job it knows how.
Absolutely. 100%. And the same thing can then be applied to the inner child. So say that child that ran out into the middle of the street, say that kid, they just got yelled at, right? And screamed at. And depending on how harsh, like if you had a really, really harsh parent, it might not have just been screaming. They might have been hitting you or beating you or, doing something like that. So then this kid gets really scared to cross the street. So what happens if this kid is so scared of that punishment it doesn't even want to cross the street when it's looked both ways. But what if, eventually going away, to college is across the street, or getting that dream job is across the street, or asking out your crush is across the street, right? This child is trying to protect itself by not getting yelled at or not getting beat by its, harsh parent or the critic in this case. And they're trying to protect themselves by not crossing that street. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. That's another way of saying, like, we're all trying to protect ourselves. So we all have these ways that we limit ourselves. Oh, I'm not going to go after this, or I'm not going to push myself on that. Well, are you protecting yourself from failing? Are you protecting yourself from what you think might be looking like an idiot? Or you're trying to protect yourself from being embarrassed or disappointed or being let down, right? So there's all these ways that the inner child is also trying to protect ourselves by often keeping us small and limited.
Gotcha. Do you do any work with like exile wounds and that type of thing as well?
So that's kind of using some of the language from IFS. And I personally like to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the wounded inner child is our exiled wound, but sometimes those languages can be really hard to digest. So I like to keep it simple. I think of ourselves as, we got the scared younger part that we try to pretend doesn't exist. And we have this really mean inner part that is probably, we like to pretend isn't as mean as it actually is inside our heads. And then we have our adult. And our adult is the logical, mature, rational part of ourselves, the one that can like zoom out and see the bigger picture and kind of holds like the goals and, sort of is in charge of how you want to walk in the world. And oftentimes the critic and the inner child are so strong that whatever they want wins, and the adult kind of gets pushed aside. So what I try to help people with is really strengthening that adult self to be like, okay, what does your adult ultimately want? Okay, you might not feel like, quitting your job and going for something else, but does this align with what your adult wants? Does this align with your values? Does it align with your core values and your morals and your ethics and all of that, right? Like, how do you actually want to be in the world? And the adult can do the hard thing and get through it. Whereas the kid or the critic, like they might not want to do that hard thing. Or the critic is like hounding you of like, why didn't you apply for jobs? Why didn't you quit your job? Why did But you're staying stuck for a reason. You're staying stuck because that kid is afraid to quit the job. Or you're staying stuck because it's, you don't want to fail, or you don't want to, not achieve your dream. Right? So it all makes perfect sense. And so that is one of the reasons you asked, like, why did I want to go down this path? Is one of it is because it helps everything you do make absolute perfect sense. Like I felt like I was crazy for most of my life. I was like, straight up, I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I acting this way? Why am I hurting somebody I love? Why am I exploding? Why am I doing this? And I just thought I was crazy. But then once I started to see that there were all these different parts of me that were making total sense based off of everything that they had experienced and been through in life.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of parts work myself, and the thing that I found so powerful about it is once you acknowledge the part exists, thank the part for everything that it's done up until this point to keep you safe, and then just let it know, hey, I've got it from here. And it just seems to just dissolve away. I mean, the part's still there and it'll still flare up occasionally, but it just seems to give its power away,
Absolutely. Yeah. One of my favorite tools or lines that I use is, it's not your job anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's no longer that kid's job. Our inner child thinks that they're in charge. They're the one that's supposed to go to work. They're the one that's supposed to be married. They're the one that's supposed to be in the relationship. They're the one who's supposed to, make the money and do the hard things. No, it's not. It's not your job to do that. It's the adult's job to do all of that. And that alone can be a huge shift for people. Like you said, like, thank you for trying your hardest to make it happen. But we don't want a 6-year-old going to work or driving a car or being in a relationship or parenting kids, right? We don't want the 5-year-old to do that. We want the adult to do that.
So for those who are not familiar with parts work or just tuning in and just trying to figure out what we're talking about, can you go through kind of quickly, just over high level, what parts work therapy looks like and kind of how it works?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is identifying these parts. And so what I will do is I will actually do what I call a parts work interview. So I will ask, like for you, for example, Russ, if I may,
Sure.
I would say, okay, Russ, I'm going to ask Russ, the adult, to kind of step forward, and I'm going to ask the critic to I'm going to ask the adult to step back and ask the critic to step forward. Okay. So, and then I would give you a moment to like kind of center yourself, and, you would come forward with like the critic. Okay. So let's get in touch with the part that's really judgmental and harsh, the part that's measuring how good enough or not good enough you're doing, and things like that. And then I would ask a series of questions. And some of it would be like, okay, well, what do you think about Russ? Like can you tell me what you think about Russ? And like, how do you think Russ is doing? And then we hear everything the critic has to say. And then it would be something like, okay, well, what do you ultimately want for Russ? And then we hear the critic's goals. And
Okay.
usually those goals are actually pretty helpful. Like, oh, I actually want Russ to succeed. I want Russ to help people. I want Russ to be in connected, healthy relationships. But the way the critic tries to go about doing that might be a little counterintuitive.
Sure.
But the ultimate goal is they want good things, kind of like going back to that protector.
Yeah. Interesting. So you're also a holistic coach. Can you tell me what that's all about?
Yeah, so I consider myself a holistic coach. And when I talk about holistic, I think of the whole self. So I actually spell holistic with a W, as in the whole person. So the reason I do that, it kind of goes back to parts work. We want to look at the whole person. We're not getting rid of any of these parts. We don't kick them off the island. We're not saying, hey, get out of here. We don't want to say like, okay, I don't like you, critic, or hey, kid, get out of here. We don't do that. It's all about the whole self. Now, in addition to that, we're not just our emotions and our thoughts. We have a physical body, right? So I use an acronym called MEDS, and MEDS stands for mindfulness, meditation, exercise, diet, sleep, and then I tack on a few other S's like screen time, spirituality, support, and sexuality. Because these are all areas of life that are impacting us now and our mental health. So if you go through that list and figure out, okay, what are my exercise habits and how can I tweak them to improve my mental and physical health? Okay, what about, that goes along with diet. And I believe our gut health, a lot of people aren't aware, but there's a ton of emerging information about gut health these days.
Yeah, that cyclical feedback makes a huge difference when you're working on healing.
Absolutely. And they're calling the gut the second brain. And that's because 90 to 95% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. And at least 50% of our dopamine is produced in our gut. So a lot of times people are like, oh, I need to take this antidepressant or whatever it is to help the chemical imbalance in my brain. But really, there's a chemical imbalance in your gut. And that's where we need to be focusing a lot of that attention and our energy, is because if you can clear up, a lot of people have gut infections that they're not even aware of. They think that things are just kind of normal. It's normal to have bloating or irregular bowels or whatever it is, but really If you clear up what's going on in your gut, it has a huge impact on your mental health.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are like, oh, I'll just eat vegetables and make sure I get my protein. But unless you have the gut flora and the healthy gut bacteria to digest those things, then just eating healthy is actually not going to be enough. But if you get that cleared up, then when you eat healthy, then you're actually supporting yourself.
So are you working with them on just general health then as well as the trauma healing that you're doing with them?
Yeah, I believe, they go hand in hand. And so, yes, we can work on skills and we can work on, these different parts. And also your mental health is totally linked to your physical health as well. So we can kind of play off each other in that way. So let's do some tweaks to the physical health that will improve the mental health. And let's do some of the mental health to then be able to get to some of the physical health too.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, they're so tied together that even just working on the mental health piece ends up helping the physical health as well. I started my journey about 2 years ago with some RTT, and immediately I noticed that I started losing weight, and I wasn't doing anything to lose weight. It just started falling off. I lost about 70 pounds in the course of a year while doing all
Wow.
these different modalities, trying to heal my mind, which in turn started healing everything else as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What's RTT? A few different things for those people that are interested in all the good freebies that are out there. I have a couple different free options. One, I have a blog that I send out every 2 weeks. I also have a 30 episode podcast that is called The Holistic Approach to Healing, and it interviews 30 different holistic healers. So if you're just kind of starting out, or if you want to, find other modalities to your healing journey, that's a really good resource. I love resources, so I just constantly am providing them. The other resource that I have that's chock full of resources is a travel guide to your healing journey.
Oh, cool.
And
What is the travel guide all about?
yeah, so that's really fun. So I love to travel. I actually just finished up a year living in a van doing van life all over the
Oh, cool.
country. So I'm a therapist and I love to travel. So I made a travel guide to your healing journey. And basically it's laid out just like a travel guide. It gives you what to pack, like what to bring, what to leave behind. It talks about different sightseeing stops you'll see along the way. It talks about cautions on the road. And it basically just kind of lays out what you can expect on a healing journey. It also gives you lots of resources like podcasts to listen to, books to read, people to follow, different things like that. So I love that resource. That one's super, super fun. I also have a monthly workshop series that I do all about parts work. So that workshop series is on the third Thursday of every month and is free to anybody. And especially if anybody's on here listening and you work with clients, it's great for people who work with clients, and it's great for people who are also looking for their own healing too. And so, for example, I do befriend your inner critic is one, soothe your inner child, strengthen your adult, hear your inner teenager, things like that. So I do that once a month as well. And then you would also find information about my speaking events that I do, and how to get in touch with me for individual sessions.
Okay, awesome. And then do you do your sessions remotely?
Yeah, everything is remote. I do travel for speaking events. Like I'm going to Washington, D.C. to speak at a conference. I was just in California and did a couple speaking events. But yeah, everything is remote.
Okay, cool. Let's see, what else can we chat about here? You said you were working on a book.
Yes.
What is that about?
I am working on a book, and it is my memoir. A lot of people say I'm too young to write a memoir, but a lot happened in my first 30 years of life. So that's what it's about. It's about first 30 years of my life, and kind of walks through, what it looked like on the outside when I was dealing with childhood trauma, a lot of the things that I was working with and dealing with, and then healing and forgiveness. So I found forgiveness for my abuser about a month before my 30th birthday. It was my goal. I dedicated my 29th year to forgiveness. and I found it right. I found it. It happened right before my 30th birthday. And so ever since then, it has been a game changer. I feel like I was really able to take my power back and not
Yeah.
be so controlled by somebody else, and somebody else who wasn't really even in my life. And so now that person is in my life, and I'm able to talk to them and have compassion and understanding for them, and also have compassion and understanding for myself and for my little girl and my inner child and what she had to experience and went through. And I get to protect her now with boundaries. And, we don't really go back into that space anymore. She doesn't have that emotional charge that she used to carry.
I
And
imagine
that's
her
really
letting
amazing.
go of something that painful was a huge turn in your life.
It was massive. It was really like a light switch. It was all of a sudden, once that moment hit, it was like a massive weight was lifted off my shoulders, and it was almost like I could see clearly again, or not even again, for the first time in my life. And that was really significant to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. I had a similar experience as a kid, and just recently, in the last 6 months or so, had the opportunity to confront that person and heal from it. And we both actually had a pretty powerful healing experience there, letting go of all that pain and guilt.
Wow.
So yeah, pretty
Yeah.
neat.
Wow. That's huge.
Yeah. So if somebody was interested in working with you, what should they expect as far as the amount of time that they would be working with you, what sessions look like, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I offer a coaching package that is called the whole activation, the whole you activation. And that's where we go in and we do these different interviews. We interview the inner critic, the inner child, and the adult, and we do an integration session. And those are 90-minute sessions. And that's kind of a great place to start, right? You're getting in touch with these different parts, you're getting to know them, you get journaling exercises, you get different reflection pieces. And so that's a really great package to start with. And then from there, we can incorporate other things. But I also use music therapy to calm the nervous system. That is a really huge, I work with the polyvagal theory, and I work with basically listening to certain filtered music that will help shift your nervous system into a more regulated state on a regular basis.
Okay.
So it's more than just like, oh, listen to this music when you're triggered and you feel better. It's like, no, this gives you long lasting impacts.
Okay.
So that's really cool. I also do tapping. So EFT. And for people who aren't familiar with what tapping is, it's kind of like acupuncture, but instead of putting needles into different energy points, you physically tap on the body at different energy points. And it is an amazing tool for releasing old, stuck emotions, traumas, and negative core beliefs.
And is the EFT tapping, is it something that you're doing specifically with the client, or are you giving them exercises that they can do at home?
I specifically do that through, and then those are also 90-minute sessions. And then I also have just regular 50-minute sessions as well. But if you're somebody who's really interested in kind of hitting the ground running, and you're ready to have some transformational work, I suggest, the longer sessions can really make some shifts in a shorter amount of time.
Cool. And you also mentioned that you do some work in polyvagal theory.
Yes.
Could you give us an exercise that we could work on as we close out and do some vagal
Sure.
toning?
Well, are you referring to like audible vagal toning?
It could be audible vagal toning. It could be bilateral tapping, whatever you wanted to share.
Okay. Well, one of my favorites is just kind of to like notice the shift is very subtle. So when you're working with polyvagal, basically the vagal nerve is the nerve that runs from the top of your spine down your whole body and radiates throughout your whole body, and it is one of the main controllers of like your nervous system. And so when you're working with it, it's very subtle. And so, for example, I'm going to invite you to go ahead and slowly look around the room and identify something that brings you peace. So it could be a color, it could be a picture, it could be something that brings you peace. And once you find it, keep your attention there. And the reason we say slowly look around the room is because if you frantically look around the room or quickly look around the room, it will heighten your nervous system. So the idea here is you want to slowly, gently look around the room, find something that brings you peace, a color, a picture, something that brings up a peaceful memory, whatever it is, and then focus on it. And just sit there and focus on it. And then once you're doing this, if you feel any sort of shift into relaxation or peace, then focus on that feeling of relaxation and peace and really marinate in that feeling.
Yeah, I can definitely feel a softening in my chest.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would want to really marinate in the softening in your chest and let that really hold you. So this is an exercise that you can stay there as long as you want, and it can be really helpful when it's something short, fast. You could do it anywhere, that you feel safe. Technically, feeling safe is important, especially to the nervous system. So that's one little exercise that you can do.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience? Anything we missed?
Just the one thing, just for anybody listening who is either dabbling in, figuring out what their healing journey looks like or on their healing journey, I just really want to let people know that healing is possible. And it can be really confusing and really frustrating because we don't have the best mental health system out there, but there are resources available, and I would really encourage you to follow your own instincts, your own intuition, your own guidance around what could be helpful for you and really dive into it. We only got this one life, and so might as well make it what you want. And I think a big part of doing that is by doing the work and healing.
Yeah, I'd agree. It can be really challenging at first to admit that you need to heal. I think that a lot of us hold on to this "I'm okay" kind of mentality to prevent themselves from having to see where they're not okay. And facing the fact that you're not okay and that you actually need to do some work can be really difficult. But once you do it, man, it's like a snowball effect.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited for you that you're kind of in this new place in life, and that must be really exciting.
Yeah, I went through a series of really traumatic relationships, and trying to figure out what was wrong with them didn't do any good, So once I started listening to a podcast by a person named Caroline Strawson. She's out of the UK. And she does some narcissistic abuse specialties type stuff in her podcast, but also talks a lot about trauma. And I have a history that's just chock full of trauma. I mean, my first traumatic experience was 3 days old when my dad picked me up and spanked me because I was crying, so it's all the way through my childhood. And then in the military, I had trauma in the military, and then continued trauma in relationships after the military. So by the time I realized that I needed help, I needed it badly. I was in pretty bad shape. And just in the last 2 years, it's absolutely incredible how much my life has changed and how far I've come. And it's it's people like yourself and Caroline and now me that are helping to bring this stuff to the forefront. And it's amazing to see. It's amazing to see the response too from the general public and how people are yearning for healing. They really are. We live in a sick world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Brinn Langdale, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. If you guys are interested in getting a hold of Brinn, she can be reached at her website, and that's BrinnLangdale.com, BrinnLangdale.com. And I'll share that in the notes as well. She's got a specific link where you can get a hold of some of the stuff that she's releasing, like workshops and things like that. So I'll get that in the show notes for you guys as well. Thanks again, Brinn, for doing this. I really appreciate it, taking the time out of your day.
Yeah. Thank you, Russ. Thanks for having me. I really, really appreciate it as well.
All right. We'll be in touch. All right, guys. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next time. Hey, so I hope you guys enjoyed this episode with Brinn. Brinn is brilliant when it comes to this parts work stuff. And if you guys are interested in working with Brinn, she can be reached at BrinnLangdale.com. That's BrinnLangdale.com. If you put in /link, that'll get you to the page that has all of her programs and her freebies where you can go in and get some information and even some programs that she offers at no cost. Be sure to check her out. If you guys are interested in working with me, doing brain spotting, parts work, general somatic coaching, that type of thing, I am also available for one-on-ones. You can reach me at brainspottingcs.com. That's brainspottingcs, like ColoradoSprings.com. Just fill out the form there, and you'll get a little brochure about all the different practices that I offer, different modalities, as well as it'll get an email to me to schedule an appointment with you. So once again, thanks for coming by and checking out the podcast, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.